Hi, welcome to the latest edition of the Global Networking Show, and it's a very special edition today. After 8 months of having some fantastic guests and some really interesting debates, Ivan Misner and I decided, well, why don't we have a chance just to have a chat with you, find out what your questions are and see how we can help you. So it's a Q&A session with Ivan Misner and with myself, Andy Lopata, today. We're going to try something else, and we're going to shorten the show a little bit. Most of the shows have run to 45 minutes. We're going to aim for a 25 to 30-minute show, just to see if that's a little bit more digestible for people, so you can find the time to watch it in your busy schedules. So, very simple show today. Ask your questions. Inga will tell you in a moment exactly how to do so, and Ivan and I will be looking to come up with the answers. Isn't that right, Ivan?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Andy. And for those of you who want to stay connected with us, you can do so on our Facebook page or on our website, globalnetworkingshow.com. With that, Inga, would you like to throw the first question to us?
Hi, yes, and I just would like to remind that you can post your questions while listening to the show, and you can post it here on Google+. Or you can post it, if you watch on YouTube, post in the comments below. You can tweet the questions using hashtag.
Yeah. For those of you who sorry, you've got background going on. You can do so. There we go. Sorry, Inga.
Yeah. Okay. So, and you can tweet the questions using hashtag GNetShow. And first question is from Alan Stevens, and it is, how do you deal with an approach from someone that you met briefly at a networking event, connected with you on LinkedIn, and has now requested to be connected to several of your main clients?
That is a great question. Thanks for asking it. I love this topic. I've talked about it a lot. I call this what you've described there. Who was it that asked the question, Inga? What was his name?
It's Alan Stevens. Alan
Stevens, yes.
Alan is a former president of the Global Speakers Federation and a media coach, and someone who I'm sure gets in a lot of demand for his valuable connections.
I'm sure, and I can relate, Alan. I think it's a great question. I call that in my gender book. I call that premature solicitation, which you don't want to say fast 3 times; it'll get you in trouble. But that's where people just kind of jump ahead and they're asking for business, or they're asking for contacts before there's any relationship. Here's what I do, and this happens to me every week at least, if not every day. Somebody is asking for access to my contacts and connections before there's any kind of relationship. I almost always send them an article I wrote on the VCP process. And Andy, we've talked about the VCP process a lot. First you have to be visible, then you establish credibility, and only when you have credibility can you get to profitability. So I actually send them a link to my article. And I say, thanks for connecting with me. Let me tell you how I do business. I do business with people I know and trust. And here's the basis of how I do business. And then I actually send them a link to that article. If you, the viewer, would like to see, or Alan, you'd like to see this article, you can go to bni.com. On the right-hand side of the website, there is a banner ad for Entrepreneur. I'm a columnist and Entrepreneur. It's a rotating ad with Entrepreneur and Fox. When you see Entrepreneur, click on it and go to the May 26th article. It's called Relationships That Last. Relationships That Last. I send them a link to that article, and I say, here's how I do business. 99 times out of 100, I never hear back from them, because they're hunters, not farmers. They're looking to make a kill. They want to close a deal, and when they find out that I actually expect to have a relationship with somebody before I start giving them referrals, they're out. And so that's usually the last I ever hear of them. But that small percentage that says, okay, I get it, I understand, then they start to build a relationship, and I'm totally good with that. That's what I do. What do you do, Andy?
I think that your approach is absolutely right. I think a lot of people, if as Alan has they've met them at an event, they've exchanged cards perhaps, and accepted a LinkedIn connection request, they'd run a mile as soon as someone asks for those contacts. They'd feel awkward. It's almost as if you should feel embarrassed that someone has asked you and you don't want to pass on the contacts. I think embrace it head on and explain. You know, you can actually do them a favor by helping them understand how to network much more effectively. So what I would do is very similar. I would reply and I would explain exactly how I do business and how I offer referrals. And what I would probably do, as long as it felt appropriate, as long as this was someone that I felt I wanted to build a relationship with, I would say, well, look, I need to find out more about you. I need to get to know you better. Why don't we have a one-to-one? Let's get to know each other outside the confines of a 5-minute brief conversation at a networking event. Now, you have to look at your time and you have to manage your time effectively and work out how many one-to-ones you can afford on a regular basis. But it's the first step. You know, Ivan, you said that 99% of people don't respond. I think throwing I'm trying to think of the right word here, but let's say an obstacle in their path, something that they have to do before you'll even consider their request, to see if they deliver on that for a start, see how committed they are to the process, is the first thing you should do. And exchanging clicks and connecting on LinkedIn is not an obstacle. It has to be about meeting in person. It has to be about getting to know each other, and it has to be about investing in each other. Not always practical, particularly if you travel a lot, but if you're going to meet people at networking events, if you're going to exchange cards, if you're going to connect on LinkedIn, then you're starting to invest in a relationship, and it's equally up to you to build on that investment as it is to them.
Now, I got a follow-up question for you, Andy. So you set up a time where you tell them, I need to do a one-to-one before I give a referral. That's a great approach. I kind of like it. I travel so much around the world, that's hard for me, but I like that idea. I think it's good for most people. Now, here's the question: do people then say, when they meet with you, do they say, okay, now we've met, is that, you know, can I now get that referral?
And that's down to how you manage the expectations when you reply. So, you know, for example, if I get a connection request from someone I've never met before, I will say, because of the way I use LinkedIn, I only connect with people with whom I have an established relationship. Now, you could use similar wording in a response to a request for a referral to someone you have connected to. Because of the quality of the referrals I like to give, I like to know the person first. Now, the first stage in that is a one-to-one. So you can be very explicit, very clear, set expectations with your wording. And I'm in the same boat as you, and the time element is a difficult one. And for you, particularly with the network of BNI chapters, you've probably got people who want referrals from you and are potentially one-to-ones all over the world, so that's not practical as well. One thing that I do is that if people want a one-to-one with me in the southeast of England, I have a day a month where, if I'm in the UK, there is a networking group that just meets very informally on the first Friday of the month in a restaurant in the centre of London. And if I'm in the country, if I'm free, I go to that event and I set up a series of half-hour one-to-ones, informal catch-ups. And that works quite well in terms of managing my diary around that. So that works effectively as well. It really depends on each individual and how much you travel, whether you're based in a local area, whether you work nationally or internationally. You can use Skype or Google Hangouts as well, obviously, to connect with people. But they have to do something to get to know you.
Yeah, good advice, Andy.
Inga, next question.
Okay.
I hope that's helpful for Alan. Sorry, I hope that's helpful.
Next question is from Graham Jones, and he asks, how do you integrate online and offline networking? What do you do to administratively to make it all work smoothly?
Interesting question from Graham. The first thing is that the two are integrated, and recognizing that they're not separate worlds. I believe that online networks work effectively well to either get you onto other people's radar, or vice versa. So you make the initial connection, and then after that, stay in sight and in mind. So you're constantly seeing each other, but the real meat is in the relationship. The real meat of the relationship, I should say, is in the conversations. It's in the face-to-face. It's seeing the whites of someone else's eyes. It's breaking bread with them, getting to know them. So you have to see the two as part of the whole relationship building process. In terms of the administration, online networks are about they're about relationships, and they're about individuals as much as face-to-face networking is. So do not build everything into a process. There's certain things you can do as part of a process, but do not make it feel like a process. So reach out to people through online networks when relevant. If you connect on LinkedIn, personalize it. Don't make it a process and just click the connect button. So I'm very nervous of this word administrate it. You need process, you need to administrate things, but it has to come through naturally and feel natural. But here's a couple of ideas of things that I do. One of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard on one of my workshops, and it came from one of the delegates, was in terms of follow-up. And they mentioned a system of 24/7/30. So once you've met someone, follow up within 24 hours, within 7 days, and within a month. Now you can use social networks effectively as part of that process. So rather than send a LinkedIn connection request immediately you've just met, send it a week later. So once you've met someone, you follow up by email. Just, it was nice to meet you. Reinforce anything that you've said in your conversation, and maybe suggest a next step. But don't send your LinkedIn connection request at exactly the same time. Leave it a week, personalize the request, and then you've got that second point of contact a week later. So that's one thing I do. Finding people, following people on Twitter when you've had that first conversation goes back to that concept of insight and in mind that I just talked about. So making sure that you do that again, perhaps 2 or 3 days later, so each time it feels like an independent engagement. So there's little steps like that that I would take, but it has to feel natural. If you go through everything as a matter of course, then there's little meaning to the connection, and it won't take you any further in building the relationship. Ivan, how about you?
Listen, I agree that it's not an either or, it's both and it always surprises me how people try to box their networking into this, put it in this little box. It's either all online or it's all face-to-face. I run the world's largest face-to-face network, but I'm extremely involved in online networking. I think it's very powerful. I think I don't know if I think I've told you this story before, Andy, but I was doing an interview in Sweden, and I had this young 20-something-year-old kid say to me, we met for the interview, and he spent the first 5 minutes berating me for running the world's largest face-to-face network. He called it the buggy whip business of the networking industry, meaning when the automobile came into play, nobody needed horse and wagon, and you didn't need buggy whips, and so face-to-face networking was like the buggy whip business. You didn't need them anymore. And I asked this kid, I said, why are you here? And he said, what do you mean, why am I here? I said, well, why did you, it took you an hour to get here, why are you here to do this interview? He said, well, my boss told me I had to. I said, I get it that you don't want to be here, but why did you drive here? Why didn't you just pick up the phone and call me? Or, do this online? He said, oh, well, because a face-to-face interview is always better. And I was just like, well, that's what I'm talking about. There's something about face-to-face. You said you got to look them in the eyes, have a conversation with them. It's not either or, it's both and. I think I've seen it done both ways, where I've connected with people online. As a matter of fact, Andy, didn't you and I first talk online and then we met?
I think actually we connected when you were over in the UK, so we established that.
Not face-to-face, but we stayed in contact online a lot, and then really spent time then actually meeting face-to-face afterwards. But it was a brief meeting, I believe, and then we stayed in contact online. That's the beauty of online networking. I can't imagine running the network I run now without the network, without the online network, because it flattens the communication hierarchy. it enables people to connect worldwide easily. And that is both good news and bad news. It gets abused easily, but it's also a great way to stay in touch with people that you've met. And so I think you can meet people online and then enhance the relationship face-to-face, or you can meet face-to-face and stay connected online over time. Either way is great. I'm a believer in it, but it's not either or, it's both.
That's absolutely right. Heather Townsend, who wrote the Financial Times Guide to Business Networking, calls it joined up networking. And it's that understanding that the two work together in synergy rather than separate and apart. So it's an interesting question from Graham, and you could perhaps see I was struggling with an answer because while I teach process in networking and strategy in networking, everything has to be natural. But I think the key is, and it comes through with your answer as well, Ivan, this idea of staying in sight, in mind. But you have to build the relationships in person wherever practical. Thank you, Inga.
Okay, I just would like to remind you that keep posting your questions, as today's show is 30 minutes, so to make sure that all your questions are in, and you can do it here on Google Hangout or on Twitter using GNet Show hashtag. So our next question.
Don't be quiet. Be brave. Throw your question out there.
Okay.
Difficult question. Make it to Andy.
Okay. So question from Jeremy Nicholas. Is it a good idea to have a headshot on your business card?
Okay, I'll tackle that. Jeremy, it's a great question. I do get asked that question more often than I would have expected. I actually talk about that in a book I wrote called It's in the Cards. And it's kind of a fun little book. It's a full-color book, and it's got hundreds and hundreds of samples of business cards that I collected over many years. And there's a whole section on business cards with photographs on them. So this is my opinion. It is just my opinion. I think there are certain professions where you absolutely need to have your picture on the card because it is the norm in that industry. One of those professions is in the real estate industry, people who sell real estate. They almost always put their photograph, in many, many countries, they put their photograph on the card, and so that's the norm, and I'd recommend it. However, in many professions, it is not the norm to put your photo on it, and I would do so only if you have a really good reason. For example, if you think that if you're in a profession where there's a lot of competition and you want people to remember who you are, that you want them to remember what you look like, then having your photograph on there is a good idea. If you're going to do that, make sure it's a professional photograph. I see people who had their pal take a picture of them and they use that pretty marginal photograph on their card, and that's a really, really bad idea. I would make it a professional headshot, which is, I think, what the question was. Should you use a professional headshot? The answer is yes for some professions, no for others, and also depending on the position that you're in within the company. If you're in direct sales, it makes more sense to have a headshot. If you're the vice president of accounting, it makes no sense to have a headshot. So it kind of depends on the profession that you're in as well. What would you add to that, Andy?
I think that I've struggled with this for a number of years, and because there's always been this argument raging. There are the people that absolutely swear you should have your picture on your card. There are people that swear at people who have their pictures on their cards and see it as an ego thing. I think you're right that if you want people to remember you, or if you have a good reason to do it, or if it's the industry norm and it's expected, then go ahead. But don't get lost in that. I think it's not irrelevant, but could be almost irrelevant, because ultimately, think what a lot of people will do with that card and why they want that card. What most people will do is take the data, scan it into their contact database, and then the card will, I hate to break this to you, it will go in the bin. So don't spend a fortune on getting a glossy picture on there if it's not going to get scanned into that database. If people are scanning pictures, then it's great. But now we have LinkedIn, and make sure you have a good picture on LinkedIn, and if people connect with you, then they'll see your picture and they'll remember you from that.
Oh, let's talk about photographs on LinkedIn and Facebook if we can, because even Facebook people, you know, they have some Facebook pages where they talk about their business and what they do. But LinkedIn in particular, Andy, some of the photographs, we almost, when I wrote the gender book, Business Networking and Sex, we almost did photographs in the book, but we decided there was no way to do it and be tasteful, because there were photographs, and apologies to the female listeners, to Inga, but there were photographs by women who were business professionals who had photos that were like really inappropriate for a business context. For a nightclub or for a dating service, they were really good. But for a business context, we had a whole list. Andy, if you want to see, I'll send you some of the photos. Of photos that were on LinkedIn, and they were talking about their profession. And it was like, oh my God, this could be a photo that you'd see in the back of some bad magazine. You know, not.
Well, I always give the advice, you know, avoid the passport shot where, you know, we're not allowed to smile in the photos and you just look aggressive with a curtain behind you. Avoid the holiday shot where you're a little pinprick in front of a huge pyramid. Avoid the Facebook shot where you've got a ginger wig on and a big pint of beer in your hand. It has to be professional, it has to be engaging, it has to be warm. But the key is understand what people use that business card for and what's important about it. I think far more important than a photo in your business card is the right contact information so that people can get in touch with you. I still see cards without an email address on, which I find bizarre. Also important on your card is that it's not printed on glossy paper, on pure black paper or dark colours, so people can't write on it. A lot of cards with business cards also happen to be glossy. Now, if I've met you at a networking event and we exchange ideas and I promise to follow up on something for you, then if I can't write on it, if I'm going to another event after that, it's a 3-day conference. I'm speaking to a host of people over 3 days, going to a lot of talks. I'm not back in the office till after the weekend. I have everything to catch up on. By the time I get to your card, have I remembered our conversation and what I promised? Those are far more important. And I speak as someone who's actually put his photo on his business card for the first time with the new cards that came through last week. But that's a design element. It's in the background of the card, almost embedded in, and it's because it's a picture of me speaking at a conference. And what am I telling people I do for a living? I'm a speaker. I share information, so it becomes relevant. But it's not about a passport photo in the corner of my card. So hopefully that helps with a few ideas.
Great points, Andy. Inga, what's our next question?
Okay, we have a comment and a question from Terry Brock, and he says, great ideas, Andy. I also prefer to have in-person connection first. Through the number of contacts on social media today, I have modified that in-person to be personal, one-to-one connection through whatever means. This has been through Google Plus Hangouts, Skype video, phone, email, and of course Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, particularly LinkedIn. What do you both think of this, Andy and Ivan?
Well, let me answer that first if I can. Some of you may remember Terry as a previous guest on the Global Networking Show. He's based in Florida. Terry and I connected initially online. We met in Vancouver in December, and we've stayed in touch online. Now, Terry and his co-author and partner Gina were in London recently, and we were trying to meet up. And I was going to be out of the country for a few days while he was here. And Terry was saying to me, well, we can have a Google Hangout, or we can have a Skype chat. And my comment was, while you're in London, where I live, I want to meet up with you. There's no point, you know, we can hang out and Skype at any time. When you're in the same city as me, ideally I want to meet up because, you know, face-to-face is naturally different. And I'm sure Terry would testify that the conversation we had on the balcony, on the terrace of a members club in the City of London was totally different to the conversation we would have had on any digital format. So you have to mix them, and you have to get the best of all worlds. And I don't think that the relationship that I have with Terry, which is very good, with Gina, that was the first time Gina and I had ever really had a proper conversation. We'd said hello before. It was really probably about that. The relationship the three of us now have, the two of them have with me now, is far stronger because we met in person than I think it could have been if we'd have just kept that that interaction online.
But isn't Terry's point, Andy, that if somebody wants to meet with you and you're not there, that connecting via LinkedIn or Google Hangout is a good alternative, pending being able to meet face to face. And if that is his point, and that's the sense that I got from the question, then I think it's a good second choice. No doubt about it. The first choice is meeting face to face whenever possible.
You're right, Ivan. I think that you have alternatives, and there's a mix of things. There's different ways of staying in touch. Just as if we've met face to face, I think twice, maybe 3 times.
Yes.
If we had only relied on those interactions, Ivan, we wouldn't have the strength of relationship we have that we've backed up by our online relationship. As we said before, they work together. But I just wanted to stress that I think there is a huge difference in the dynamic between online interaction or a personal relaxed interaction, and when it's one thing you can do to try and make whichever channel you use better is to drop agendas at times and just get to know the person, relax and enjoy yourself, enjoy each other's company, rather than simply sitting there and saying, well, tell me about your business. You know, people used to ask me for scripts for one-to-ones, and I just wouldn't give them to them. I don't think you need a script for a conversation.
I get the script thing. I think giving a few questions for people to get started is a good idea, and I've done that, and I have seen exactly what you're talking about, where people, they literally have a script, particularly at networking events, and they go, so...
Yeah.
What do you do? Oh, and what's your target market? It's really, it's not an interrogation. Have a conversation.
Ingrid, I think we've got time for one more question.
We have one more question, and we have one question in a queue, if it's okay. And
let's try and give quick answers to them, and we'll try and get them both in there.
Okay. So the first question is from Jeremy Jacobs. And he's asking on selecting where you network. Is it really true that somebody just might know something in authority at a corporate you're looking to do business with? And my take is that freelancers tend to stick with freelancers and SMEs tend to stick with SMEs. Let me know the feedback.
Oh, and we've got to give a quick answer to this one, Ivan. That's going to be difficult. Do you want to try first?
Sure, I'm happy to. I think that networks are by nature clumpy. That's the technical term. They're cluster-like. We tend to hang out with people like ourselves. So what Jacob's question is, or his comment, is absolutely on the mark. People tend to hang out with people they feel comfortable with. And that's actually a weakness. If you want to have a powerful personal network, you should have a diverse network. The more diverse your network, the more powerful it is. And so those people who are SMEs should be networking with the freelancers, and the freelancers should be networking with the SMEs. Diversity is absolutely key in building a powerful personal network. That would be my first cut at that, Andy.
I'm going to differ from you for a bit here, Ivan. I agree to a degree that we need diverse networks. I totally agree with that, and that you have to avoid surrounding yourself with just people like you. But in terms of Jeremy's question about do freelancers know people in authority at a corporate, then very often they will. Because what we tend to do is we put a label on people and we say that's who you are, that's who you know. Now, just a very simple example of this, someone who was in one of the very early BRE groups was a one-man band. He was a consultant, he was a freelancer. he had only recently left employ as a director of a major international airline. So his network, if you looked at his name badge, you looked at his business card, you would picture him being surrounded by freelancers, but in fact, his network would have been very high level, very senior in big corporates, not just in the airline industry, but who would his neighbors be? Who would his friends be? People that he'd worked with and engaged with in the past. So we have to see beyond the individual and beyond their name badge into the networks around them. So yeah, absolutely diversify your network. That will give you more reach. Don't just hang around with people like you, but at the same time, get to know people and understand who they might service. I'm a 3-person company. A lot of my clients are corporates, and I know a lot of decision makers in corporates. So again, you know, it depends what people's background is, who their customers are, who their neighbors are, what their family do. There's a range of different factors that determine people's networks.
Listen, I agree with what you're saying, Andy, completely. I don't think that just because you're in an SME, it doesn't mean you're going to have great, you are or are not going to have great contacts. You can have great contacts there. I absolutely agree with that. You never know who people know.
That's right.
My point is, the last part of his question was, do they tend to stick with each other? And the answer, I think, is yes, and they shouldn't. But they can have a powerful network whether they're a freelancer or an SME.
And we'll be able to restore the connection.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have one last question, and we're out of time. Let's see if we can hit it quick. Inga, do you want to throw the one last question?
Yes. Last question is from Simon Phillips. What tactics do you deploy to maintain existing relationship as your global network continue to expand?
I can tell you what I do is I absolutely use social media. I use Facebook. I use LinkedIn to some extent. I use direct connections via email, talking to people, and Skype. So it's all about touch points. How many times can you connect with somebody, to stay in touch with them regularly, to have conversations with them regularly? I use this crazy thing called a telephone. Actually pick it up and call people from time to time.
Ivan, we lost you for a lot of that.
Okay.
Sorry, unfortunately we lost you for a lot of your answer. But the key was the social networks, and it goes back to the staying insight in mind that I was talking about earlier. And I think Facebook and Twitter are fantastic at that. Retweeting, commenting, liking updates reminds people that you're there and that you're thinking about them. The most important thing with maintaining those relationships is that you find reasons to get in touch when it's about them, not about you. And that's key. If you only go to people when you need their help, then they'll soon tire of that. If you go to them with no agenda other than to find out how they are, then they'll respond. And I found that this week I've gone back to everyone who was on a course that I delivered last year in Ireland, and I've dropped them all an email just to see how they're doing and what they're up to. And most of them have responded within 24 hours. I only did that yesterday. And the conversations are stemming again. People would like to hear from you, but they don't want to hear if it's about you. They want to hear that it's about them. So there's lots of tips around that, but just to keep it short, just that key thing. Take yourself off the agenda. Get in touch with people when you don't need something from them, and they'll stay in your network.
Good advice, Andy. Well,
I think that's all the time we have time for today. Thank you very much, Inga, for asking the questions, and thank you very much for those of you who asked questions. We will look to do this again in a few months' time. In the meantime, catch up with previous shows at globalnetworkingshow.com. This show will be out as a podcast. You can subscribe on the Apple Store, on iTunes, and check us out on Facebook, on the Global Networking Show, at Networking Show on Twitter, and of course on Google+. Ivan.
And next month we're going to be doing a show on health and networking. And what in the world does health have to do with networking? I think our answer may surprise you a little bit. Again, let me repeat Andy's comments. Go to globalnetworkingshow.com and join us on Facebook, on our Global Networking Show Facebook page. Thank you all very much for watching the Global Networking Show. We'll see you next month.
See you then.
Bye.